Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Lydia is a human endlessly fascinated by the forces of air. As an aerospace engineer, she designs repairs for the wings of commercial aircraft. As a breathwork teacher, she engages with air-breathing engines of the humankind. Her work, taste for adventure, and the inquiry of her spiritual practice have propelled her to study and write about the co-collaboration of both nature and technology, recognizing that there is poetry within science and science within poetry. Lydia teaches yoga, breathwork, and qigong classes in the Tucson area, where she resides in an Airstream in the Catalina mountains with her husband and pup, Yogi. I met Lydia through our breathwork collective, a beautiful breathwork space in 2021. And since then, we have had the extreme gratitude to know and love one another deeply. I'm so honored to have her here in this space to allow spirit to guide us into whatever comes our way. Welcome, Lydia.
Hey, Danae. Oh, it's so nice
Hi.
to be here. I always love chatting with you.
Always. It's always such a pleasure and an honor. You have truly shown me what it means to be a good friend, and you've been an incredible reflection to me in my life and knowing myself on a deeper level. So thank you.
It feels reciprocal. Yeah, I'm really glad we met right very soon afterwards. I left, but I feel like our friendship has only grown deeper. I've had some really beautiful calls and messaging exchanges that have just so nurtured me and grounded me and made me feel less alone in what I was going through. And yeah, I cherish you. I'm so glad that we met.
Same. It's so mutual. And to know that the breath bound us in friendship is so, so beautiful. I know that you and I briefly spoke about this not too long ago, but I don't even know how it began, or I feel like it just came out of the ethers for both of us. And it was
Yeah,
just the breath saying, you two need to be friends. And I'm so grateful that it happened.
yeah, I know. We just completely, our paths met. We coalesced, and I think it was for me a sense of recognition of like, oh, this is a kindred spirit.
1,000%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I loved having you in Portland, and it was so brief that we were spending time with one another in Portland, and we dropped in space, and then you were off and on a journey, and it's been so fun to witness this beautiful cultivation for you to come into and receive the discovery that Spirit has called you forth into. I would love if you could briefly just share a little bit about where your journey has led you, specifically from Portland on, because it's been pretty vast and it's happened very quickly. This just huge evolution of Lydia.
Huge change. I know. And it's like as soon as I feel like I get my sea legs for one phase, there's a new thing coming up. Yeah, it was so like during the pandemic, like you, I was like really leaning heavy on my breath practice, not as a self exploration or just like a cool thing to do. But I actually really needed it. I was depressed, and then I lost my dad in May of 2021. And I had been planning a career transition, like a bit of a mini retirement, a break, so I could study breathwork and yoga full time and just, like really like dive into it. And I was sort of like teetering at the ledge. And then that was like the lift. And I just felt like, okay, I'm doing it. It's no longer an option to stay doing something that I don't really like. That is what I've known. And to just like take a leap and feel like, okay, well, I have certain boxes checked. Not everything, but I think I had the trust available to know that I would figure it out. So around the same time, I met Logan, my now husband, and we had a first date um, in one of the parks in Portland, Oregon Park, and that was another like catalyst. And this was only 4 months after I lost my dad, which, looking back, it's like, what were you thinking? Like putting yourself out there dating at that time? But I was so open. I was so cleansed by grief and love at the same time that I knew exactly what I wanted. And I was so connected to the type of love that I had with my dad that I'm like, nothing else will suffice. Like that is what I want. So I was in the lane, I feel like. And when we met, it was another sort of recognition. And he was living in this box truck that he built out himself. He's a musician, so he had lived in Portland for the last 10 years or so and was traveling internationally on and off. But he showed me that he was already living this life that I was like gravitating toward, researching, trying out. I had a pop-up tent on top of my Mini Cooper, and I took it on these long road trips. Like I went to Utah in it. And so I was just trying to see, like, could I do this? Could I live out of a vehicle? Could I like do the nomadic life? And here was somebody who he was just natural at it, and I just saw that he had all of these abilities to figure out things, to DIY, to fix things in his truck. Like he didn't pay somebody to build it out for him. He did it on a budget by himself with his dad. And I was like, that's my kind of person, you know. I love that. So shortly afterwards, I put all of my stuff in storage. I went on a leave of absence from my job. I eventually quit after that leave of absence, and I moved back home to West Virginia. Or part of my plan for like sustaining myself was working on this property that I had with my sister, turning part of it into an Airbnb and part of it a home for her to live, because rent's going up everywhere and it was becoming really hard for her to manage something. So we did this together, and that was also a healing experience for us to like be together while we were grieving our dad and like making something beautiful out of it, like restoring the bones of this old 180-year-old house. Yeah. And so during that time, Logan was traveling down to the Sonoran Desert here in Tucson. That's where he spent the past 2 winters, because the Pacific Northwest isn't very hospitable in the winter to van life. So he invited me to come stay with him, to camp out in the desert. And we saw pretty easily that our personalities just really work. And Yogi is a van life dog. She's okay with traveling on the plane and kind of going to different places, different smells. And so after a couple of these trips, you know, when you're in small space like that, you know pretty quickly if you're gonna get along, like if you have what it takes to really flow together. And so it was at the sort of the beginning of 2022. I was staying with him. We were camping. We did a little road trip to California. And the plan was for me to fly to Southern Baja for this 21-day rebirthing breathwork retreat. And it was sort of open-ended, like what we were going to do, because he was living in this essentially tiny studio. Yogi and I were already pretty nomadic. We had sort of finalized this project with my sister. And I just really like knew that the answers would fall in during this soul excavation. And they did, you know. It was a breathwork session. It was multiple breathwork sessions where it just became crystal clear, like you guys are going to go back to Portland. You're going to sell or give away most of your stuff that's in storage. And I really found like, yeah, I can let go of this. I can put the things I really care about into 3 boxes and ship them back to my sister. The rest of it's going in my Tacoma, and we're going to caravan out of Portland. And then figure out the next step. Like it was on that, when we did leave Portland in the spring, after I'd quit my job, like that we started trying to think of what's next. How are we going to live? We can't be spending a lot of money in motels, Airbnb, stuff like that. So we started thinking about getting a used Airstream together. And that was another like major decision, putting the savings that we had left during this time to find something. And we found pretty easily, we just found it on Craigslist, like as we're driving, something that we loved. And it happened to be in Eugene, Oregon. And the guy was a vintage aircraft, but like biplane mechanic, and had done a shell off restoration of this thing. And it was, again, love at first sight. It was like, all right, we're doing this thing. We're just going to jump. We created like a little contract that we had notarized. I don't even know if it would hold up, but like we trusted each other, and we moved into this Airstream that we started towing with his truck. And then it was like a summer of van life. We went back to West Virginia. We parked this on my mom's property. We spent a lot of time with her, which I think helped all of us. Logan and her got along immediately. She adores him, and he helped with a lot of things on her house that I couldn't do. And only made me love him more to see him like selflessly helping my family. We helped my sister with some house projects, and then it sort of became apparent that it was the end of our time there, and we needed to figure out where we're going to be. We were thinking about Santa Fe, we were thinking about Tucson, of course, and we left West Virginia just heading west. Like, at this time, my truck had broken down, and so I needed to go back to work. And I applied for this job at Miraval here in Tucson. I applied for a couple different jobs in the aerospace industry, like doing a previous job that I had done in California, type of work I really like. And so within like a 3-day span, I got interviews for all of them. And 2 of them, the engineering jobs, were remote. And the Miraval job was like a dream, because I knew where Miraval was. It has these sweeping mountain views and all of this nature. It's really, really stunning up there. And so I was like, if I could make this happen, that would be amazing. I think we'd be really happy there. And so, within the next like week or 2 weeks, I had interviewed for all of them and got the Miraval part-time offer first, and then the other 2 rolled in, and I was able to kind of choose the one that fit the lifestyle that I wanted the most, what really spoke to me. And the day that I got the Miraval offer, I rolled both of my ankles on a hike, and because there was obviously like a lesson to learn before I started teaching.
I forgot about this. Oh my gosh, yeah. I totally forgot.
I know.
I'm remembering now, but oh my gosh, Lydia.
Yeah. So like, I think that pretty much brings us up to today. Like, I started working at the beginning of this year, after almost a year off, and so now not 1 but 2 jobs. One of them does not feel like work though. It's my teaching job. So and they work together. They balance each other out.
Yeah. And I know that for you, so much of that is the flexibility that is provided to you in your engineering role as an aerospace What exactly are you doing with them? I know that you're supporting folks and inquiries and things that they have, but I know that you also have that flexibility, so you can kind of do the things that you crave to do.
Yeah, yeah. And part of it was because I worked for 5 years on this team in California in person. So I had a pretty good grasp on, like, I did a lot of work travel, going to airlines, going to customer sites, going to our factories, and, just sort of having that foundation made it easier to transition into virtual work. So I do structural repairs of commercial aircraft. So the same aircraft that you fly on, and if it's at the gate and they say they need a part, or hopefully nothing, nothing like really crazy, it would come to us, and it would go to my team if it's a wing part or a tail part, and we would look at it and give them a solution, and hopefully not keep you at the gate too long.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And at Miraval, you've been able to really lean into this exploration. You've been practicing so many of these incredible modalities for quite some time, but to see yourself in flow with what feels innate, I'm
Mhm.
sure has been such a gift. So, can you tell me a little bit about what that process has been like for you, just to watch your passion and your purpose come alive?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about work as a meditation, especially when the work that we do doesn't feel like the most aligned or the most interesting, or like it's bringing our full potential out. Um, because I've really struggled with this, especially when I started um, pursuing spiritual studies and started doing yoga like 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, I'm really interested in this. Like, I want to teach this. I want to study this. I wish I would have studied psychology. I wish I would have studied this or that. I want to write more. All of these things. But like, they ask us to choose what we want to do at 18, and we get on a track. And so it's been a big part of my journey to kind of like reconcile with that, and
Mm.
to feel satisfied and fulfilled. And I found that, like, when I'm able to have this outlet, when I'm able to serve, when I'm able to just be face to face with like other like-minded people, my coworkers are amazing, and getting to teach, getting to help people, just getting like human contact, um, at that level, at like a really heart opened level, um, is so nourishing and so fulfilling that it makes it possible for me to not only feel satisfied, but to like feel motivated, inspired
Mm.
for work that used to feel maybe not aligned, or not completely challenging, or too challenging, like hard and boring. Because I think we all have that. It's like, oh, this is like really detailed stuff and I have to research it, and I'd rather be doing something else. But like, I'm finding that it's more of a meditation. Like, I can feel grounded and do and recognize that um I'm I also feel that I was called back into this particular engineering space for a reason, and I don't know what that is yet, but I'm doing Reiki before I send out these messages and sending it to the plane. I'm thinking of everybody on that plane, and that feels like, wow, there's something here. And it just was sort of this thing that I experimented with and felt good. And so, who knows?
I think that that's incredible, and what a testament to especially the breath and the air element. I think it's so fun that the two have intertwined and interconnected in what you are utilizing as a service, even in the aerospace space. It's like that gets to be part of your service and what you are pouring out, because I know that just from knowing you, I know that everything you do is with intention and with your heart. So I love to hear that you are practicing and navigating what it looks like to also utilize Reiki in a space where maybe that's not the normal, the normal case. That's probably most folks that are in that field are probably not doing that, I would assume or guess. But that you get to bring that nuanced territory in the mix is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to just like what you said, a lot of intentionality, whether we're completely agnostic about these things, we can recognize that like what little we do matters, not necessarily the work itself, but we're in this web of relationship with other people, and we impact people by the way we do everything. I've definitely found that in my yoga practice, my breathwork practice, and you can't help but see it trickle out everywhere.
1,000%. Yeah, it's really incredible to witness even how I'm sure from the very beginning at the inception of your practices and the modalities that you've integrated into your life, you've seen this change within yourself, and you've seen multiple different iterations of Lydia that have been able to move into old familiar spaces and new places, and you get to just feel more at home within your own vessel, and that in itself is such a gift.
Yeah. I think you nailed it, because I maybe had chosen this path for reasons that weren't completely like heart led. I was good at math and people directed me to this, and I also knew the opportunities that it could provide. I also knew that commercial aviation would give me a chance to travel, and that was like big in my 20s priority. So I think I had a lot of resentment of like, oh, I didn't choose to be here, and it's not where I would choose to be. But today it is, because I completely left. I mean, I had a whole trunk of college notebooks that Logan and I took all the paper out of the binders. We recycled the paper. We took the binders to like an art store recycling place. So everything, my whole education, besides my diplomas, I was like, I'm okay with it leaving. Because if I go back, I know that like I will figure it out, and there are resources that I still have available.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I obviously resonate with everything that you mentioned about doing something with intentionality, because there are days, because I do not feel like I'm in alignment with my 9 to 5, where it's like, this feels like pulling teeth, but if I can remain in my center amidst getting a call where somebody's not being the most kind, and still utilize my ability to stay regulated within my own nervous system, and I can still emit kindness and receptivity to that person, then hopefully it's felt. So even in that, it's like, we get to still utilize the grace and space that we have to do what we can with the tools that we have for whatever the time is. So I appreciate you saying that. It's helpful to hear how you receive the world, because it always makes sense for me as I hear it through your articulation.
Likewise. Yeah.
I do want to circle back to the injury, because I think that is such a fascinating part to the puzzle of you just navigating life, because
Yeah.
physical ailments can really teach us a lot about how we just perceive the world and how we feel the world somatically. So can you share a little bit about your injury experience, because you didn't just hurt one ankle, you hurt two.
Yeah, it was like, oh, because the message wouldn't go through if I only hurt one. I would keep chugging along on my walking boot, but this was like, whoosh, broken at the root. You are now temporarily in a wheelchair. And the first couple nights, Logan had to carry me to the bathroom. And so this was only like a month and a half after we discovered severe corrosion on the underside of my truck that the person I bought it from, this dealer, like covered up and tried to hide, to the point where, I mean, these pictures would terrify you. I drove it back from the welder, and he was like, it's completely irreparable, and I just want to show you this because I don't want you to ever drive this thing. So I felt like I was spared a massive accident. This was 2 days before we were leaving for Arizona. And so it was like, now you don't have a vehicle. You have to depend on this other person. And that was terrifying for me. Someone who's always had their independence. I always felt like, well, you know, I'm in this committed relationship, but like, I still got my truck. You know? And so it was that. And then there was the next iteration of like, you can't leave this person's side. This is your caretaker for a while. And yeah, everything that I had to like let go of, surrender to, and receive even more support, even more help. I think that was a big part of this whole 2-year experience, like leaning into the support of my mom, my sister, my family, recognizing that it was time for me to just be with them, for us to all be together in this really tender and beautiful and sacred time. And it felt like a continuation of that, of like, this person is going to be your family now, and their family is as well. It happened while we were hiking and staying with his family. And they were so amazing, just like so supportive, took care of me. We were able to stay at their one level house, because I'm not going to be able to live in this Airstream in a wheelchair, until I was able to at least be on crutches. And yeah, I guess I learned like just how resistant I still was unconsciously to allowing other people to help me.
That in itself. And then to know that part of your work is purpose led, like you literally are a space holder for community. And so by allowing yourself to receive that support, now you're more open to it as a space holder.
Yeah.
And so what a beautiful gift of receptivity that got to be part of the gift that you got to receive amidst also having to traverse through a very challenging time.
No, but like the way that you just said that made me realize like, oh yeah, this is why it happened. This is why it was like this initiation to being a space holder in a regular in-person basis. For sure.
Yeah, I heard like from spirit as you were first saying and just sharing about what happened, that it was an initiation, especially with Logan. Like, talk about initiation with sacred partnership and deep trust. And I hurt my back like around the same time. Well, a little bit before you hurt your ankles. I know that we were injured for a little bit of an overlap. I remember that. And I had already been married to Brian for years, and it was still challenging for me to receive support and love and care from him during that time. So I commend you for allowing that to be part of the process, to actually just receive Logan's love and what he was willing to provide for you as your sacred partner in this beautiful dance of life, because it's not easy when you are an independent woman and we're taught or told that we have to be some kind of way as an independent woman, when really part of the gift of softening is receiving.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough. Like I remember in your podcast today talking about the vulnerability that we expand into when we do this work. We practice, we come home to ourselves. And that's certainly been the case. It's like, you could really hurt me if you're not here for me. That's the fear. That's the fear that I had. Or maybe I am really alone. What would that mean?
Yeah, and it's like a very interesting dance, because there's also like the attachment, and it's like, that almost can like hurt your head, right? Because it's, to have the attachment is, nothing is ever promised to us, because we all will go. But at the same time, and this because you lost your dad, they're never not a part of us, even in the next realm. So to know that community and relationship is a thread that gets to be interwoven into exactly who we are is like that's the gift. And Logan, I've seen you just flourish, and even just your joy, like you sparkle, like, not that you didn't before, but someone in love, and someone that feels supported. More importantly, I think someone that feels supported and seen by another, by their beloved specifically, because it's so deep to be seen by someone in that way. It really, you and I have talked about this many times, but sacred partnership and marriage specifically is a spiritual practice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like we get these relationships in this earth realm because that's the way that we're actually able to physically, emotionally, mentally, tangibly evolve, co-evolve. That's the arena,
1,000%.
like, ultimately.
The ultimate arena, 1,000%. Because when the shadow comes out, it doesn't come out generally from it generally comes out from a reflection of how an interaction happened with someone else, or how someone else made us feel, or whatever. But it's like, well, someone else didn't make you feel that way. Like, maybe it's a trigger, maybe it's something that you just haven't fully sat with. And so to really lean into those uncomfortable places is the hard work of the arena. That's the battle.
Yeah. But it's so worth it, because you develop this, not only trust in yourself, but this really, really deep trust in this other person.
Yeah. And then that gets to be the playing field for what you can do to cultivate relationships that feel like they're in alignment, and where deep trust can be built outside of partnership.
Yeah, and I feel like I had friendships that were stabilizing me to be able to be in this type of partnership. It wasn't like, I definitely learned a lot in previous relationships, but in my own friendships, and different friendships that have, you know, we've gone our separate ways, or our time was coming to an end for one reason or another. And anytime that there was rupture, like I was trying to practice, and I know you are too, these things that we're learning, that we're orienting toward.
Orienting towards, for sure.
Yeah.
That's like part of wearing the new skin. And I'm glad, even just talking about family, you going back to West Virginia and you living on your mom's property and being in such close quarters with not just your mom, but also your sister. And, you know, when we spent time together, when you visited, and a couple, feels like weeks ago, I think it was about a month ago, we were talking about that specifically. And the quote came up from Ron Doss that, if you think you're enlightened, go home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so it's very much that. And I would love for you to just share a little bit about what you were able to learn and cultivate as a practice from being at home with your family for an extended period of time, because I know that can be multifaceted, to say the least.
For sure. And it was interesting because sometimes we don't see that we're showing up differently. But Logan, my mirror, has now spent a span of a year between when we were living with my mom and sister and then when we just went back for our wedding. And he was like, "You are so different. Like, I just see that your reactivity toward them has mellowed out. You're able to just kind of roll with the punches, to even find humor in these things." And I think it's really, he and I have helped each other with family stuff. Like, we're able to balance it, to provide levity, to help us find the gratitude in what our families are providing, to focus on the positive, to focus on the good. Um, yeah, and I think when you lose someone, it certainly helps you reorient toward that. I did a shit ton of work on my dad, with my dad, before he left, and that is what I'm most proud about. Like, we had a very strained relationship, and in his later years he was really sick, a lot of autoimmune issues and the fallout of thoracic cancer. And he really he converted to Catholicism and really leaned into that path. And he just did so much praying and so much devotional work. He wasn't like really super religious, but he was very, very devout. And I saw a softening in him, and I mean, that's what the breath immediately opened me up to. I thought I was like healing a relationship when I went to this breathwork retreat. No, it was about your dad. Of course it is. So finding that I had the capacity to forgive him and forgive myself, and not only do that, feel that, but tell him that, and express to him just how much I loved him and how much he had given me, shown me. When he died, I had no regrets, nothing left unsaid.
Thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing that very intimate part of your journey. And I think what a gift to not leave anything on the table. What a gift to know that there's peace there, not only for him, but for you. For him to be in the next realm. Obviously, everyone has their own beliefs about what happens when we move on to the next whatever. But for me, I very much feel that he can feel the peace that you have inside your heart for that relationship, and that provides him peace. And I believe that to be true.
I do too.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's to lose someone is obviously, talk about a rite of passage. We were talking about that before we jumped on, and that in itself is a rite of passage, 1,000%.
Yeah. It felt like the most important work that I could do. You know, just it, breath work was sort of the doorway to doing a lot of I had a lot of help, but a lot of healing. And, you know, obviously I wanted to share it. It's my passion. But I was really healing and working on my own stuff so I could put it back into these relationships and to see them change. And it does. Like, I can only speak from the direct experience of my own life. And that's anytime that I try to share what I share, practices, modalities, truths that I found, it's evident to me because I've just used it in my own life. And I think that that's the only pulpit that we can each speak from. Right?
1,000%, 1,000%. I'm full team that. Yes. Like, like the experience is always obviously very personal, but if we've experienced it and we know it to be true, then it is. Do people have to say that it's true for them? Absolutely not. But it gets to be truth for us, and there's no denying that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think having just visited home and having had that experience be so ever present even in my here and now, it was the first time that I had been home and felt like I'm actually seeing the healing and the happening. And I am so proud of you for doing the work for yourself to then bring it home, because I know how challenging it can be. From my own experience, I know how challenging it can be. So I honor you in having created this space for yourself to go home for a very long period of time and really be faced with all of it, the grief, the reactivity, the past family trauma, because, you know, there's always those things that we have to navigate that were stored into the body at some point in time as a child. And so you had to process all the things.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
Yeah. And I think that it can be even more challenging, revealing, vulnerable when your partner is there with you, because it's easy to show them your best side, but man, the real stuff comes out of the woodwork in those interactions, and everything's on the table. But if you can help each other, whether that's a partner or a friend or whoever, without turning away, without judging, is really, really such a gift. And I try to recognize that when someone is doing that for me.
I would imagine Logan is a bit of a bridge, and I know that Brian is for certain relationships in my family. And yeah, I mean, there is something to say about having a partner who gets to see the layers and then also gets to see the change that's taken place, because it sounds like Logan has seen that. He has seen the reactivity, and then he's also seen you hold the space and grace for the family to not try to like fix or, you know, want something to be other than it is. You and I have talked about that a bit, and that's the struggle. It's like you want to oftentimes show a family member or shows a loved one, like, there's another way. You don't have
Yeah.
to do this. And also, we can just love them as they are. And even in that, even in creating the example, like, that's almost the permission to like reflect that energy back to them so that, okay, cool, I accept you as you are, and maybe we can try to do this a different way next time. Not
Yeah.
telling them, just showing them.
You just being the atmosphere for them to step into. It's really underrated, and it's subtle work, and it's slow, and it's patient, and it's unglamorous to simply just be a space for someone, but it really can shift like nothing that I've ever really experienced. Like the people in my life who are just a space. You're one of those people. And I shouldn't say just, but who are a space. And I know that I can come to you and show up with whatever's going on, the peaks and the valleys, and to just be held and, to be given room to move how I need to move, make decisions, figure out what I need to figure out, and not have to worry, or try to manipulate myself into something that I'm not.
Manipulate something and yourself to be, yeah, that's huge. That like, yeah, I think everyone can relate to that. I don't really think that there's a person out there that hasn't manipulated their self to be something other than what they are at some point in time in their lives. And it's hard. Like, that's where we put ourselves in those icky dispositions to like be farther away from what feels innate and what feels like it's in alignment. So I'm so honored to be in relationship with you because you are that space for me as well. And I do think it's so lovely that our friendship, while it did begin in person, it has really taken shape to being a long distance friendship. And I'm so grateful that we make the time for one another. And we also are so forgiving of what time means and when, like
Yeah.
when we each have the time to show up.
Yeah. And I just feel that generosity of spirit that you imbue into our relationship, that like there's no pressure, there's no expectation. It's felt and received and really, really valued by me.
I know it is, and that's what's made it such a safe space for, I think, both of us. And I'm so grateful that I have you in my life to be able to, you were truly one of the most clear mirrors for me in my life. And I'm so honored that we get to be in relationship together because, like marriage, there are certain people in life that you get to be in sacred relationship with. Even though it's a friendship, it still has those same fundamental truths where you get to be a mirror and you get to impart loving, just openness for another person to be exactly what they are. And I always feel that way with you. I never have not felt that way with you.
Same. And I remember when Logan and I left from visiting with you guys, he was like, oh man, when can we hang out with them again?
Same.
Yeah.
I know, same. Brian thought that I think like he heard, but I think he was just tired from the day, and he was like, so they live here, right? And I'm like, no, they don't. They don't live here. He was so
Yeah.
excited that because I think because we mentioned that you did live in Portland
Yeah.
at some point, and I think he was excited to hear that you did, even though you don't any longer. But it just means that we have a wonderful place to visit when it's winter here to go catch some
Yeah.
sun.
Right, right. And I think we'll be up in the Northwest just about every summer. We have too many people we love up there to stay away for too long, and it's definitely one of our homes.
Mm. I did want to touch base because when you were here in Portland, you got to create a beautiful intimate space with Logan, and that was your first class that you had held in a studio space together. And I just wanted to ask how that went and how that felt for you, because what a gift for you to not only be sharing space as a space holder as an individual, but then to also integrate your partnership in the midst of holding space for others. That is really powerful.
Yeah, that was so much fun. It was at Biography in Lake Oswego, and I had met the owners, Rachel and Shane, at a breathwork ceremony in a friend's backyard in a yurt the night before the lockdowns happened. So it was like one of those, cosmic occurrences, and we were brought back there. And yeah, Logan and I have just sort of been experimenting with breath work, and he plays all of these different instruments. A lot of them he studied through his travels, a lot of rhythmic drone instruments that really just have this like captivating, hypnotic, meditative quality. And like breath work, it's one of those, like sound is one of those things you can tune into without having to struggle. It's just like this anchor and partner. And so, yeah, we've just sort of like started playing with this stuff. And I make him play for me while I breathe and like before I go to sleep sometimes. And I loved it so much that I really like encouraged him to join me in this. And it's just made it so much fun. It's a creative vehicle for both of us. Like we're always, and it's a way to just be in touch with like the sensory experience. Like, oh, what's the subtle emotionality or vibe or sensibility of this rhythm, this music, and then what type of breath would that go with? You know. So I think that we at least bring that into these shared spaces, and it just feels really good. And he is a big joker, and he's able to provide like comic relief at the right times in places that may get too serious, or like I'm in my head about things. I think we balance each other out pretty well with that.
It's always helpful to have that in a partner. I
Yeah.
have that as well. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I hear when you share that, what I hear is that it sounds like there's such an opportunity for creative play in the midst of co-creating with your partner, and that sounds really juicy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. Lots of
I love
things
it.
brewing.
That's like, okay, beautiful segue. Can you share how folks can work with you and your offerings, please?
Yeah, I would say right now I write pretty frequently on some of the themes that we've touched on my Substack, and I also put um, any events that I'm hosting in that area as well. Um, and I am planning on sharing more like recorded journeys of what we've been putting together. So that will also be in the Substack channel. You can throw your headphones on and breathe with us and listen to the sounds. What I always like to say is, like, if you don't feel like breathing at all, you have a sound bath. So you can just tune into that. And I love that, like, that's a nice option, because sometimes it's just getting in the door and being in the space and letting the energy move through you. And I have a deep respect and trust for that myself.
Definitely. Frequency can sometimes, I mean, I've been in sound baths before where I just feel just as blissed out as I would coming out of a breathwork event. Yeah. And it's just interesting because when you get to open yourself up to whatever is meeting you and you get to actually receive it, like just letting yourself receive it, that's the gift. And knowing that spirit or the creative force of whatever that thing is in you, that gets to be it. And we don't need to think too much about it. It's taking this thing out, the mind, the monkey mind.
Yeah.
Well said. And if you could leave us off with one sweet offering of experiential wisdom, what would it be?
Experiential wisdom. I would say, I think that a lot of us have big things that we'd like to do, big things that we'd like to step into, but we don't know how that's going to happen. And we feel like we need to have all of the ducks in a row, everything prepared, as if we would be able to control anything on the other side. So I would say, look back on your life and look at the things that you were able to figure out. And maybe you even spend some time writing them down, and the things that you didn't know that you just grew into, and give yourself a shot, recognize that, like, what you need to know will be provided when you need to know it.
Yes. So good. That was a good word. I needed to receive that. I'm going to sit with that one later. So good. So good. Yes. Thank you so much for your time, for your energy, and always for your love. You radiate it so clearly, and I'm just so grateful for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And where can folks find you on the socials? I'm going to put all of your information in the detailed description, but if you could share it here, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, breath upper left. My website is lydiamcdowell.com, and my Substack is Life and Breath under Lydia McDowell.
Ooh, love that. Yes.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you so much, Lydia. I appreciate you and love you so much, and I hope you have the most wonderful rest of your day in your cute little Airstream with Yogi and
likewise,
Logan.
Danae. It can only be just sparkling and shimmering after this conversation. I feel so lifted by your presence always. Thank you.
Always. So much love to you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.